Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am Melissa Cawthorne, Event Manager at Global Digital Finance, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this Global Leaders Town Hall in partnership with Global Blockchain Business Council with special guest Lord Holmes of Richmond MBE. Lawrence Wintermeyer, Executive Co-Chair of GDF and GBBC UK Regional Ambassador, will host this town hall. Lord Holmes, member of the House of Lords since 2013. Core policy focus is on digital technology for the public good, with a particular interest in technologies such as AI and blockchain, and areas of application such as fintech, govtech, regtech, and assistive tech. Co-chair of APPG on fintech, and has published reports on distributed ledger technologies. We welcome and encourage your questions. If you have a question, please feel free to submit them at any time using the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. I hope you enjoyed today's session, and I'd now like to welcome Lawrence and Lord Holmes.
Well, thank you very much, Melissa, and a very warm welcome, Lord Holmes of Richmond, to our Global Town Hall Leaders Series.
Delighted to be here. Thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Lawrence.
Well, especially with the busy schedule that you've had over the past few days, tabling proposed amendments to the Financial Services Bill, which is where I'd like to start today. Now, I think you've had the past 3 days or so tabling amendments, and this is following the Chancellor's Q4 2019 bill, which I think when I looked at it and we were speaking about it in the past, looked like a number of remedial items that were fairly important, but not very big on fintech, financial inclusion, digital assets, those sorts of things. And so I thought it would be good to take the audience through the 5 amendments that you've proposed one by one, and just have a bit of a chat about what it is you're proposing and why, what you see as the requirement of the burning platform for it. So let's start with number 1. Improving small and medium-sized enterprises' rights by permitting rights of action for breaches of Financial Conduct Authority Handbook. What's that all about?
Thank you, Lawrence. And just to take a quick step back, financial services bills don't arrive all the time. So I think it's beholden upon us to take the opportunity that it presents. When it was introduced, it was described as a portfolio bill. So much for that, that's all well and good. What I hope that we can do, myself and colleagues, by the time it leaves the House of Lords, I hope it'll be more portmanteau bill. There's a lot that it can carry forward, not least in fintech, financial inclusion, SME, and crucially the international picture. So this amendment is very much focused on that SME piece. Currently, if there's a breach of the FCA, which is the Financial Conduct Authority, our financial regulator, if there's a breach of that handbook, action is only permitted if you're an individual. So if you're an SME, yes, you may have the agreement, the contract to rely upon, but it seems fair and reasonable, particularly when we focus on the S of the SME, that they should have rights of action similar to those permitted for individuals. If we imagine so many of the fintech businesses, the startups, they can be quite small micro operations and none the worse for that. It seems somewhat unfair and asymmetrical that currently under the regulations, they have no rights of actions which are available to individuals.
Excellent, excellent. Let's move on to the second bill amendment, introducing or proposing a review of financial services regulation. What's the scope of that, Lord Holmes?
This amendment, there are a number of amendments that it's possible to bring forward, and we're currently at committee stage just to help people who may not know. This is the time where the bill is presented and we have the opportunity to put in these changes or amendments. Amendments can be quite narrow and specific and technical in scope. The first one that we just ran through there very much fits into that. This one is very much in that more broader general probing amendment to really get the government's response on a broader issue. In this sense, really suggesting that it's an opportune moment as we've left the EU, as we will come out of the COVID crisis. It would seem to make sense to have a general and broadly focused review of all financial services regulations, and indeed the rules of the two prime regulators, the Financial Conduct Authority and the Prudential Regulatory Authority at the bank. Seems sensible to review all of those just to ensure they're absolutely optimized for the outcomes that we seek.
I mean, I think that's exciting, and we'll come on to some of the findings of the Khalifa review a bit later, the UK fintech review. But it sounds as if you're almost front running a bit of this with proposals with these amendments. So moving on to 3, adding a financial inclusion objective to the remit of the Financial Conduct Authority, which again, for our viewers, the FCA is quite unique in that it's got a competition mandate. So the proposal here is all about financial inclusion.
Very much so. I think we have a great regulatory framework in the UK and some very good regulators, not least in the FCA. We saw a number of years ago, the regulatory sandbox was an excellent initiative, and it's not for us to say whether it's good or bad, it's just to see that it's been emulated over 50 times around the world. Well, that's a reasonable measure of success. But I think alongside that work, alongside the competition imperative, which is quite right, alongside having a broad perspective, it seems to make sense to me that there should be a line of sight through all of our regulators and our firms concerning financial inclusion. So this amendment would put an objective on the FCA, which would rank pari passu with their other objectives on financial inclusion. Similarly, it would then track back to the Bank of England and track forward through the authorised firms. So what I'm aiming at here is really a golden thread of an objective for the promotion of financial inclusion, running through our regulators, running through our firms, and running through all FS transactions and thinking, really, and looking at it again in the broad sense of what constitutes financial inclusion. Is obviously horrific at an individual level for those who are on the sharp end of it, lives stunted, possibilities put down, opportunities ruined. But financial inclusion also covers SMEs who are underbanked, who can't get the lines of credit they want, they need. That's a tragedy for those SMEs, but it's also a huge loss of opportunity for those regions and indeed for the country, and through that for the global economy, to have growth held back just for the want of a more efficient, a more effective means of doing credit, of assessing risk. So this amendment really speaks to that in the broad sense, true financial inclusion and the breadth of what that refers to.
And our audiences typically focus on the crypto digital assets community or the later stage fintech community. This amendment is proposed for the regulator across all of financial services, whether you're an incumbent or from any particular subsector within the financial services. Is that the way to read this?
Certainly, it covers the whole arena of financial services. And in that sense, it's an objective on financial inclusion, which is utterly inclusive of the entire community where they come under the regulator. So when they're authorized businesses, and indeed, I know we're going to come on to talk a bit more about the crypto picture and where we would like to see that go in terms of regulation, authorization, and how that can be positively moved forward and interact with our regulators.
Well, I just have to say, I think that is an outstanding innovation, just in the way that the competition mandate with the regulator really set off a lot of the growth of the fintech ecosystem. I think this could be profoundly important to the UK and broadly to the global policy framework. So watch this space. Now, another one a bit close to my heart, Amendment 4, a duty to report on environmental, social, and governance status of funds. Can you walk us through that one?
Certainly, and I stood up and moved that particular amendment yesterday, just to give it its complete freshness for everybody on this town hall. What I'm aiming at there is in no sense seeking to distort the market or overstep into the market or suggest that some assets are non-new or anything of that nature. I'm taking the opportunity to enable all of those trillions of dollars that are under management to put an obligation on fund managers to report up as to the environmental, social, and governance elements of their funds, and indeed of each constituent part of those funds. So we bring in more transparency, we bring in more accountability, and for individuals, and indeed for institutional investors, and for everybody involved in this space, there's far greater clarity as to what's happening, where those funds are investing, what the implications are. And as I said yesterday in the chamber, we have such an opportunity now to use some of the 4IR new technologies to enable this in a far more real-time, far more profound way in terms of how we can take in this information, ingest it, analyze it, report upon it in a far more impactful, as I say, real-time way, which should benefit all concerned, not least the fund managers themselves.
Again, a very exciting era, and I always think this is akin to open banking. If we can set up the open data infrastructure for investment managers, to be able to report on this, we can really move the dial. Okay, number 5, the Fifth Amendment, and this one's a bit close to my heart, having a misspent youth in the north of England, demutualizing building societies and setting up life pensions and investment companies. So I'm really keen to hear about this one, but this is the case for regional mutual banks. What's it about, and what's the real driver or imperative for this?
Thank you. What I'm aiming at here is a real sense of taking the opportunity to connect capital closer to the people, the individuals, the SMEs who are in need of that capital. So there's obviously been a lot of debate around the whole concept of patient capital. I think that needs to be fast forwarded into 2021 and be part of this regional mutual structure. I think if we get it right, it can speak to the levelling up agenda. It can speak to the power of the regions. It can speak to place-based growth. It can speak to the whole sense of now, more than at any other time, with the power of 4IR technologies, we truly can have businesses, we truly can have clusters of businesses anywhere in the UK, anywhere in the world. And to have regional mutual banks as part of that, closely connected to those clusters, seems to make a great deal of sense to me. And with what we've seen through the COVID crisis, I think it's probably a good time to reconsider this whole concept of mutuality, this whole concept of how young people go about their banking. So in no sense do I see these regional mutual banks needing to be a 20-floor skyscraper in the center of A town or B town. They need to have a physical presence, absolutely, but they need to have at least as profound online and crucially, at least a profound mobile presence to really be part of those journeys in a more patient capital kind of feel to it, looking at how we can unlock some other investment flows and investment instruments, looking at how we can put some more power behind currently existing tax reliefs, some of them pretty unknown to most people. Getting all of that into regional mutual bank model, I think could be a pretty powerful combination for the regions, and we could then see a country more balanced. And if we were looking for an international comparator there, I think looking at the Lander model in Germany tells us a lot of lessons that are worth at least considering.
Well, very exciting and very amenable to blockchain and distributed ledger technology, which are very effective and efficient at mutualizing things in many ways. Now, you hinted a bit at the legislative process and the time frame. Can you give us an idea of what to expect from here? The amendments were tabled in the House of Lords. Where do we go from here? How long does it take? And what chance do we have of seeing these bills become law?
So we're going through committee stage. Committee stage is likely to complete potentially next Monday or next Wednesday. Then the government will give their considered response to all of these amendments, and we'll go into what's called report stage then, and that's where amendments can be brought back for further consideration and sharpening up. We then have third reading, then there'll be the conversations that happen between both houses of Parliament, then the bill will become law, will become an act of Parliament. So it could well become an act of Parliament not too long, probably after Easter rather than before Easter, I would say, on the schedule we're currently at, but probably by the end of April.
Well, very exciting. We'll watch this space with great anticipation. Now, you were also speaking in support of Lord Stevenson's amendment regarding the promotion of financial well-being, and Baroness Noakes' amendment, which addresses the important issue of the effective oversight of our financial services regulators. Again, you know, my interest level in both of these is immense, in that quite often I think as an industry, and having come from the financial services industry, the investment management industry, and latterly fintech and digital assets, we're very good at talking about capital, more capital for us, innovation, tax relief, you know, getting blinded by the big numbers, looking at how we get up the funding escalator and go to IPO. I think a measure for financial inclusion for the regulator is just a real game changer, but ultimately it's the outcome and financial well-being, particularly in the context of COVID and coming out of a global pandemic, which is an economic crisis, is almost increasingly, you know, as important, or maybe even more of a focus or an opportunity for us to pay attention to now. And again, it seems to be a theme in your own proposals and narratives that in order to accelerate a lot of those things, we need to have regulators and policymakers better linked up, and not saying, well, look, it's not my area, that's somebody else's area because I look at this. So can you give us an idea of what you were supporting with these amendments, and what we can expect from these?
Very much so. I think you express it very well. It's really, to put it at its highest level, it's about that collaborative effort, collaborative endeavor that we should all feel and want to strive towards in financial services. FS shouldn't be seen as just the square mile of the City of London, though fantastic things, great individuals and great firms work, produce capital, jobs, opportunities, and taxes from that square mile. No two ways about that. But financial services are for everybody, almost whether you like it or not. And the sharpest end of that are those that understand financial services because they're effectively shut out at the extreme end of financial inclusion. So that's why I was very keen to support Lord Stevenson in his amendments. He's a great guy, an ex-chairman of Step Change, the debt charity, really, really good fella. So has done a lot of work in this space. Great to work alongside him on that. Baroness Noakes, very keen to support her views on oversight and scrutiny. Again, that key piece of the jigsaw. If I'd had a better education, I could say the Latin for who watches the financial watchdogs, but in the expansive but not expensive education I had, we'll leave it at that. But it's a crucial point. It can't be that we just have regulators raking their own backyard, doing their own thing, no matter how proficient and professional they may be. It ties into the future regulatory framework review, which is currently underway. And it seems to me, I wrote a piece on this last week, that there needs to be very much a sense of the right level of accountability, the right level of parliamentary scrutiny. I suggest a joint committee made up of members of both houses, but crucially allied to that, there needs to be the independent, expert, skilled voices in that mix. And that scrutiny needs to be there all days, every day, not just popping up when there's a perceived or actual serious regulatory framework. People need to be on it all the time. So it dials down the politics, dials down the trivial, and has that sense of understanding the beat of day in, day out scrutiny of regulators for the benefit of everyone. It's not about a question of a trust deficit. It's a question of how do we collaborate across the FS landscape to have optimal outcomes for all concerned.
Well, and I think that is an important point now to consider, particularly post-Brexit. It is actually a great opportunity and a great time to review this. Having worked around the world, I believe the UK has one of the most progressive retail financial services markets that you'll see anywhere. Again, while we're always looking to improve diversity, social diversity or gender diversity, there certainly is a great degree of product and risk diversity available to many consumers. But again, you lead on this, and we've spoken about this many times, still at the expense of a large number of people in the community that are excluded. But I know progressive regulators are keen in the UK to get this addressed as well, because I think we're always using terms like holistic or industry terms that I think people probably don't understand. But in this case, financial well-being makes sense. Everybody really deserves. I mean, it should almost be a human right in this modern day and age that financial wellness or financial well-being is something that governments help through progressive regulation or the right size of regulation to subscribe to and deliver. And the progressive regulators I think always explain it in a very rational way, which is, when customers go to their financial service providers to buy things, they're not thinking what's regulated, what's not regulated, what's regulated by her or him over there versus us here. I mean, consumers just want an experience. They want credit, they want investment, they want debt of different scales. So I want to save money, obviously, which has become very unpopular given negative interest rates, although we're keeping an eye on inflation again. So I think this really does appear to be a great time to actually review this. And we're just, we're really, I think, energized by these amendments that you've proposed.
That's very kind. And you put it exactly right. Why shouldn't it be, as with any other brand, any other customer experience, there shouldn't be an absolute centric focus on user interface, user experience in all the glorious forms it looks like. And it's about that sense of the connection, the enablement, and the empowerment that comes from that. And to take a radical example of it, there's absolutely no reason why, with the tools we have available to us in this devastatingly full of possibilities digital landscape, why we couldn't have a relationship with our tax authorities in whichever jurisdiction we're in, which feels more like a participatory, real-time, experiential relationship with the tax authorities, rather than that letter that drops on the doormat at a certain time of the year, wherever you are in the world. And we all know what that feels like. Absolutely no reason why there shouldn't be that participatory real-time connection with the tax authorities, because ultimately it should be. Now it absolutely can be. And ultimately it's all of our money.
Well, exactly. And I think quite often, depending on where you are in the socio-demographic picture, there are a lot of tax benefits that typically you probably don't know about and you aren't taking advantage of. So it's not just the efficiency of collection or somebody knocking on your door saying, have you paid enough? It's making sure you're actually getting the benefits out of the system that have been baked out of the system. So I think it's an excellent point. I mean, we're just really excited to follow this. And I think we're going to have to get you back a bit later in the year to follow this up. Let's change gears now and move on to the Khalifa review. So if I guess the financial services bill, when the Chancellor announced it in 2019, didn't have enough exciting things for me in it, it commissioned the UK fintech review and Ron Khalifa. And the team have come together and they've done a fantastic job. And I always say, well, I always laud anything that really gets the government's attention to really make this bigger and better in what we've always called the jewel and the crown of financial services, that being fintech. I still feel there were opportunities maybe to go further on digital financial inclusion and wellness. So it's great to see on the periphery, you and the Lords running flank on that. But if we just focus on the review, and I know you've had a busy diary over the past couple of days speaking about it, what do you think of the 2 or 3 most important findings and recommendations in the report? And how do they relate to some of the amendments that you've put forward? Is there a bit of a joined up bit to that, or are there recommendations that have come out of the Khalifa review that you think, really stand independent of some of the things that you've proposed in your FS bill amendments?
Certainly, and the FinTech Strategic Review, the Khalifa review, was published last Friday. As you say, it's a good piece of work. It's additive to the overall debate. He did a great job in getting some excellent chapter heads together, not least Kay Swinburne and Rachel Kent on the policy and regulation chapter, which rightly is the first chapter that comes in the report. I think there's so much that we need to read and take out of that chapter. I think the most important elements for me within the report are firstly, the need for a digital economy task force, however one chooses to call it, a task force which can drive across government, across Whitehall, a task force that can connect public with private sector and be a nexus for public policy problems meets private sector solutions. That's in the report. I have an amendment coming up probably next Monday, which talks about a centre for financial innovation. It's conceptually the same thing. And obviously we can have discussions as to the perimeter and what goes within that. But the importance of having a centre is absolutely vital. The reason why I know that perhaps even broader than just financial services, when I was lucky enough to be one of the directors on the London 2012 Olympic Games and Paralympic Games, we needed so many government departments to do stuff. We didn't just need their support, we needed operational stuff from them. We needed resource, we needed people, we needed bucks from them. We managed to get 18 government departments across Whitehall to work together, to come together, to put on what was London 2012 Olympic Games and Paralympic Games. It would have been a very different experience without that. It would have been a hideously hard road to that Games without that. Why did they get involved? Because they wanted to be. We had this fabulous commodity, the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games. We had the most immovable of deadlines. Nobody was going to say, wow, what a great Games that was, London 2013. It was possible to galvanize around that vision and that mission. But here's the thing, no matter how good that sensational golden summer of sport was in 2012, no matter all the economic, social, regenerative benefits we drove off that Games, and we did, compared to the opportunity of transforming financial services for individuals, SMEs, for the totality of a population, a country, and through that rippling out right around the world, that is almost infinite, almost boundless. So I think to have that centre at the centre of HM Treasury, absolutely vital. Just to pick one other recommendation, I think the scale box recommendation is crucial. I've got an amendment down, I call it a growth box in my amendment. Same concept, and it takes us back to what we were discussing earlier. The FCA sandbox has been a tremendous success story, replicated right around the world. What we now need is a scale box to do exactly the same thing for our scale ups. So what we should be able to have is this pipeline, this accelerant, right from seed, right through to $1 billion plus great British businesses. And when I say British businesses, I mean businesses coming to found, coming to start up, coming to scale in this country from right around the world. Because one thing is absolutely true, which is assistive to all of this. As you know, Lawrence, very often, all the time you spent here, London is without doubt one of the most diverse cities on planet Earth.
Without a doubt. And I would echo the scale up box. I think particularly whatever category of digital innovator you are, you need a place both on market and off market and time to demonstrate the job you're going to do. And it's quite often too early to tell with many digital innovations whether they're going to work or not. They just need to be risk adjusted so that the risk can be managed for the ecosystem and for consumers. And so whether it's Hester Pierce and the safe harbor proposal or the MiCA equivalent of an industry sandbox, I think most of the sector would laud that. Clearly in the crypto and digital asset sector, we would hope that we'd be able to virtually link those up so that we can talk about cross-border activity. It's the often in the digital assets world, the multi-jurisdictional issues that start to become complex, mainly in that, either the framework or perimeter framework, if there is one, or legislation quite often treats these things differently, but very exciting and one step at a time, but again, I think lauded by the community. Let's just step up a bit before we step back down into particulars of crypto digital asset. But we're always, I've spent years speaking with you on the importance of fintech to the UK. How important is it post-Brexit? And I don't mean to be trite, but one side of the community has said, my goodness, not having services included in the Brexit bill or equivalents, we just cut off an additional 270 million customers. The other side of it says, this is fantastic. We can, establish ourselves without the encumbrance of state aid rules and really put ourselves as an international center. Again, I think, which argues to your point, what a great time to look at a refresh of regulation. And so you hinted at this in the London Olympics, and I think for any foreigners that are tuning into this, I'm not quite sure you would appreciate it, but the London Olympics, I think, again, as a foreign Brit, it was a masterclass in the type of mobilization you spoke about. It galvanized not just cross-government department, but private-public partnerships and the community. Everyone was really focused. In fact, you like to think, gee, if we could get our global pandemic relief together like that really is the sort of model that we aspire to do. But how important is Brexit? And are policymakers and politicians really listening? Because I think the issue, whether you're an industry or trade association, is there's been so much complexity, I think, with Brexit and then COVID coming along. There just isn't a lot of capacity to do a lot of stuff, but man the forts. So can you give us your thoughts on that, Lord Holmes?
Certainly. And there's no question we have the most tremendous opportunity in front of us. And in saying that, I'm not saying anything whatsoever about Brexit, whether it was a good thing, whether it was a bad thing. The only thing that matters is that it is a thing, and it's a thing that's happened, and it is now 2 and a bit months past. So we have to look at the whole landscape, look to where our competitive, look to where our comparative advantages lie, and absolutely see what we need to do and what we have to do now. I think there is a real opportunity in fintech and broader than that, in what you were saying quite rightly at the outset, Lawrence, to view all of this in terms of the digital opportunity, the digital transformation, the 4IR transformation, if you will, to look at it in all those terms. If you're a detractor, firstly, it's not helpful. What's the point? And the detractor chat often falls into a place where, in a very negative, derogatory way, London gets described as moving towards being Singapore on Thames. Firstly, Singapore is a tremendous place and a tremendous place to do business. And it's derogatory to what we're trying to do in the UK, and it's derogatory to Singapore. We don't need to sing for Singapore today. They do that brilliantly and have got great chat for themselves. But the reality is, going forward, we are not aiming at, nor should we ever be aiming at, anything which doesn't look to global standards, potentially being at the leading edge of setting, working together, collaborating around global standards in crypto, for example, because it's standards, it's certainty, it's clarity which drives growth and drives business. And if anybody doubted that, look to some of the greatest standards of all, the rule of law in the UK over centuries, and what certainty that's brought, and what that's not just brought to the UK, but why do we think that contracts are struck using the laws of England and Wales and the jurisdiction of the courts of England and Wales? Certainty, clarity, developed, evolved over centuries. So yes, it's incredibly important to the UK. No, we have no coronated God-given right to be at the forefront of fintech or of any tech or of any sector. But if we construct the offer in the right way, if we enable the understanding of the breadth that it is, the financial, it is the economic, but it's the social, psychological, it's the political, it's the legal, it's the geographic, all of those elements, I believe, add up to something which is pretty special. And that is the UK, not as a rule Britannia kind of a way, but very much as a nation open to trade, to collaborate, to connect wherever one is around the world. And to your point on services, well, it is what it is and that'll be what it'll be. The great thing about services when it comes to trade, you don't have that drop off that you have with goods. The fabulousness of 4IR is the ability to trade with Brisbane, Berlin, Buenos Aires. And the great thing is, if you've got the right idea and a great business, you can do it on a laptop from your bedroom via the cloud.
Yeah, which is how I started running hedge funds, back in the financial crisis. I love this, and people are going to think we had a chance to speak about this narrative in advance, which I assure our listeners we haven't. But as the co-chair of a not-for-profit that's dedicated to standards, which would sound pretty boring to most people in the community, I think you raise a really important point that I'd really advise policymakers to wake up and pay attention to. And the story of the City of London and the growth of capital and the Anglo-Saxon capitalist model, certainly through the Reformation, was built on weights and standards and standardizing the merchant classes. And the time-honored learning in that, particularly with fintech, crypto, and digital assets. So for folks like me who are focused on advocacy, this would just seem to be the best opportunity to set the standard for the hub, for global data, for global identity, for global data interchange and exchange, whether that's digital or sustainable finance, ESG. to set the standards for global crypto and digital exchanges, custody, settlement, because those are things that the UK does very well now, but need to be now translated into the way we speak about the fourth industrial revolution, the fifth industrial revolution, or the digital transformation that's coming about us. And one of my biggest learnings of working with you, Lord Holmes, and in the community is, we've been speaking about these things for a number of years now. The complexity in translating that message, not just to policymakers, but to capital, to people in the community, is just much more complex than anyone would think. Even digital pluralists and people who get the technological community and get policy. But this is really an area I think you've raised, which is important, because if we can work out how to accelerate that, and the secret sauce here, the fairy dust sprinkling, is the collaboration that came together in the 2012 Olympics. That's actually the mindset I think that people really need to adopt to this, which does mean, really, why wouldn't we take a wholesale review of all of the regulators right now? What a better position in history do you have to do things like this? Now, I've got one more point I'd like to raise, and then there's a few questions in the queue I'd like to get to, but that's the role of fintech now post-Brexit. But you and I sit often on many panels, discussions, which I always feel grateful to participate on with you. And the message we get broadly from the foreign competition, or certainly the foreign capital, whether it's America or China, is you need to get your act together here, UK, because this is a hugely competitive landscape. And to the point you're making about digital, which is that there really aren't any boundaries, it's easy to miss out on this stuff. And so what's your message, I think, to policymakers in your own community, just about how big this competitive threat is to the UK, and not getting a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right?
I mean, you put that perfectly, Lawrence, and what you perfectly put there is the other side of the coin that I was saying about the ability to trade globally in 4IR, to be able to not have those friction points or the problems of distance. But as you correctly identify, the other side of that coin is you can very easily up sticks, unplug the laptop, and go to Berlin or Buenos Aires or Brisbane. That's the flip side and the truth of it. So like any opportunity, like any business, like any nation, in the right way, as everyone knows, this is about sales. It's about the sell. And I mean that in a broad way, not a grubby way. I mean that in being able to communicate and connect what the sell is for London, what the sell is for the UK, and to be able to really effectively, coherently, and honestly answer the question, why? What's in it for me? Why would I? And they're not wrong questions. They're the right questions that people should ask robustly of London and of the UK. And I think we have great answers to those questions right now. We have a lot more we have to carve out, hence the stuff that I'm putting into the financial services bill. As you've touched on a number of times, we have to decide what we're going to do about MICA. We have to decide what we're going to do about the whole crypto space. We have to decide on CBDC. We can't allow, and when I say we, I mean not just the UK, we in the broader sense can't allow crypto and that whole sort of space to be just a conversation about what Libra/DM or whatever it's going to be called next when it has another brand change is doing, or indeed what the People's Bank of China are doing. Important. We have to have the global perspective to understand what's happening. But as you and all of your community know well, it's a far more sophisticated, far more nuanced, far more levels, far more plural ecosystem than just those two bits of it. There's no reason why the UK must get on the front foot when it comes to standards around crypto. what we're going to do, the dematerialization of securities, for example, what we could do in terms of the use of DLT in that space, how it could be used in post-trade process, all of that stuff. It gets quite technical, but none the worse for that. I mean, as you say, who'd have thought that people would get excited around a conversation around standards? But the point is, people should be unbelievably on the edge of their seats when it comes to standards and all this stuff, because it's this which is the brilliant basics. And it's the brilliant basics which enables all of that joyous potential to come racing into the UK and developing such opportunities for people here. But again, in a very outward facing global nation perspective.
Well, I'm energized listening to that. Clearly, it's not just because one of my roles in life is co-chair of a standards association that's focused on crypto and digital assets, but I'm doing it having spent a life in business and capital markets, with the understanding that it's the best accelerator that you can get. And then I think you rightly point out, on Chris Willard's watch at the FCA with the original innovation hub, the whole focus on sandboxing and bringing innovation to regulators really, I think, changed the financial services world, and the data is there to prove it. So, it's really about getting that narrative you've just spoken about aligned with everyone and getting everyone on the same page, because there's a lot of upside here. And the thing that I find most interesting about the information asymmetry, particularly in the crypto and digital asset sector, is that quite often policymakers don't appreciate that there are more former regulators and risk managers in the sector, in the 4IR digital sector of crypto digital assets, almost than there are in the traditional sector now. So it's actually in pretty safe risk-adjusted hands. Right. Now, sorry, go ahead, Lord Holmes.
No, just a quick one on that. You make that point beautifully, Lawrence, and it's a sense of the understanding that just because with the correct deployment of these new technologies, you can gain agility, acceleration, all of those points, doesn't mean that you thus increase risk. Quite the contrary. And again, it's always worth everybody remembering the tremendous leadership role that you played when you led Innovate Finance. You were right in the midst of all this at that time at the UK, and you did a tremendous leadership role for Innovate Finance for all across this landscape.
You're too kind, sir. Listen, let's deal. We've got a ton of questions here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through all of them. Let's deal with it a bit like a rapid fire round, so that we can try to get through some of them. So this is an anonymous attendee. Does the UK plan to excel in a certain fintech category, so a subsector or category, or all industry boats should float? So is there something that we really want to specifically focus on? I know digital identity has come out, because that's another one of these things that seems to be an important piece of the jigsaw puzzle for acceleration.
Yep, I think it'll be some of the underpinning principles and enablers that we should seek to excel in. Digital ID for individuals and corporate entities is one of them. The deployment of ethical AI is another one. Yeah. Distributed ledgers is a third one. So it's broad, but I think we have real competitive advantage in a number of the sort of underpins, the enablers.
Well, I think that's a great point. I mean, I'd be saying focus on standards and infrastructure, and the rest takes care of itself. Markets will make themselves. Another anonymous attendee. Thank you, Lord Holmes of Richmond. Really appreciate your time and insights. What advice do you have for young UK entrepreneurs and also international entrepreneurs trying to do business in the UK?
Believe in yourselves, believe in your colleagues, believe in the ideas you have, connect, collaborate, work extremely hard, because that is ultimately in every element of what we do. The magic fairy dust is just this: work very, very hard, because not everybody does. Connect, and great stuff will happen. And to everybody on the call, I see this absolutely as another beat point on the journey. It's a beginning more than an end. So do feel free to connect with me through all of my channels. I'd love to hear, love to connect, love to collaborate.
Well, and I suggest everybody on this call to take Lord Holmes up on that. This is a great one. This is from Andrew Churchill. Great if we get inclusion in as an FCA mandate, and inclusion is certainly crucial for the UK domestically. But should we also look to take advantage of the FCA chairing the global sandbox of the innovation hub, I guess in this case, to take this further into developing financial inclusion for the rest of the world, in particular, where inclusion is an even greater concern than it is in the UK. That's a great point.
Great point, Andrew, and thanks for everything that you're doing across all of this work. Completely agree. It ties into that global facing, global collaborating, global influencing piece. Completely agree. Every nation, every community is on a different stage of the inclusion journey. It's always a journey, not a destination. There's loads that we could do. There's loads that we should do in that space. Completely agree, and well put.
Right, now, this is from Anonymous, and Anonymous, you've just got part of the answer because you can reach out to Lord Holmes of Richmond anytime. But the question is, what can we do as a blockchain community to help you?
Anonymous has been busy on the questions. She or he has been putting down multiple questions, which all power to Anonymous's keyboard. Thank you for the question, and do get in touch at Lord Chris Holmes on Twitter, lordchrisholmes.com on the blog, chrisholmes.co.uk on the website, and indeed, obviously, on LinkedIn, Chris Holmes. Absolutely, the whole blockchain piece, fascinating. It's why I did the report in 2017. And again, collaborate, connect, believe in what you're doing. There's a lot of good government chat on this. We all need to keep pushing to turn a lot more of the chat, a lot more of the proofs of concept into actual pilots, scales, and really enabling this to come in from the margins and become more and more pervasive, as I'm sure it will and should, and we absolutely should lead on that.
Well, and I'd be remiss of me not to get my pitch in, which is if you're in financial services, you should definitely think about joining Global Digital Finance. And if you're focused on global blockchain, our sister organization, Global Blockchain Business Council, and Sandra Rowe, who does these global leader series, would be happy to help you with this question. So just feel free to reach out to me, lawrence@gdf.io. Okay, Dan Feeney, is there truly political appetite to get digital identity right this time after the first failure a few years ago?
And thank you for the question, Dan. There's absolutely political will. There's certainly a lot of good energy and force in there. There's still the inevitable tricksiness about it in terms of a number of different political wills in the mix. But to cut to the chase on this, again, we should never be able to afford another misfire. But in the environment we're in now, we absolutely have to get this right. I know there's a lot of great work. If you're involved, keep getting stuck into it because it's absolutely critical. Can't be overstated how critical it is to get this right. So your point is extraordinarily well made.
That's us for time. We're going to have to cut the discussion off. Lord Holmes of Richmond, it goes only for me to say thank you very much for attending our Global Leaders Town Hall in what I know is a busy schedule, not just with getting the amendments through, but your obligations on Khalifa report panels. We really appreciate it. And I have to say, sir, every time you and I speak about what we feel are the important issues to the community, I'm energized, if not in awe. And so we've got a lot of great feedback from panelists, but let's just hope that the whole community ups its game now and we get beyond the meta narrative of fintech, capital, talent. All of those ingredients are important. We know that. But we're not making bread anymore. You know, we're making a Michelin star, main course. So we need a lot more than just capital and talent and right size regulation to make this work. But sir, thank you very much, and we'll look forward to having you back and following up on the amendments, the bill, and the Khalifa review.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you, Melissa, for all of your help and all your organisation. And to everyone who's joined the town hall, thank you very much indeed. Do keep in touch. I look forward to seeing all of you soon. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. One service announcement. Of course, thank you to everyone for joining us today. Our next Global Leaders Town Hall is on the 9th of March with Joe Rowitz, Dragon Chair founder and CEO, with Sandra Rowe, the GBBC CEO and GDF board director. So thank you all for joining us today in what I'm sure you will agree was probably one of the most insightful and visionary discussions that we can have on digital in the UK moving forward. Thank you.